Blue Train, a bedtime narration. The underlying chugging track clack, pervasive but not obtrusive, allowed Francois to finally steady. It had been a hectic 48 hours or so. The blue train and her engineering rhythms and the steady rumbling underpath of steel lines was a return to his own thinking after the traffic, the taxis, the rush. He had stayed too long at the museum. He only just reached the station in time. He found his carriage, his compartment, only just sat down when the train pulled out. It was a private museum. It had been his dream to see it for years. That is why he stayed there as long as he possibly could. It had been difficult to get permission. He had assembled the necessary papers. He had a letter of introduction. He carried it in his top pocket from Professor Whalen. He spent most of the day looking at the exhibits. He was especially taken by a statue. He had only heard it rumoured in the past. Now he had seen it with his own eyes. Returning to your own thinking, easing into rolling syncopations, the constant drumming of chunking wheel beats allows the mind to be its own museum, catalogued and tidy. Francois is not an expert. He thinks of himself as a talented amateur, and he spends his idle but most precious hours constructing timelines, testing established narratives. He would read, but there are no books written about the artefacts in this private collection. In everything he had read, there was only a passing reference to the statue. Professor Whalen had only alluded to it. It must be priceless, Francois was thinking. So ancient, so beautiful. The interior and fittings of the blue train refer to another era. The panels are a dark oak. The glass in the windows and the door panels is the old glass with flaws and ripples. The handles and bracketing is all brass, but not excessively ornate. The soft, swaying carriage-pulling springs ride the syncopations. Outside the window is the dark countryside moving like frames in an animation, and a copy of Francois in his reflection. He notices his own eyes. He is alone in the compartment. He can take the window seat. He can stretch back into himself. There are questions, though. Where was the statue found? What was its provenance? What explains the water stains? He had stayed too long at the museum. He stayed until they were closing the doors. Then the taxi to the station was caught in the traffic. He was hurrying through the bustle as the last call came. All aboard. The departing sign came down. The porter in his blue uniform waved the flag. The train tugged, then pulled out. He just made it. The defining thing, the haunting thing about the statue was the thin, understated, coy, ever-knowing, almost carnal smile on the lips of the goddess. The artist had carved marble like putty. The perfection was underwritten by the question, what is she smiling about? But we have lost the context. Perhaps it was carved to sit atop a tomb, ironic, or was it tutelary in the foyer of the home of a rich man? The water stain is not a scar on her shoulder, but the garment of time draped over her immortality. The lines run in parallel and fade into a point. The emptiness of a museum is the space where living things once moved. The train moves through the night. The lighting in the compartments is the warm, soft, antique, yellow-white light of old globes held in neat brass brackets. Francois spends much of his time in ancient spaces illumined only by a reconstructed sun, in the light of which we can never be sure if our speculations are not just illusions, wild guesses. Artifacts speak only to those who made them. After that, they echo our own questions. The seating and the armrests are blue leather. The door to the carriage rattles. The wooden joints of lullaby panelling speak and groan, but gently. The door is a sliding door with glass and a finger grip in brass inserted. It is out of time with the wheel clacks, or offset, but not enough to keep Francois from cataloguing his afternoon. He had an odd experience at the museum. He found himself lost. He stopped to look at an exhibit, put down his bag, but when he went to collect it, it was gone. He walked around the museum, empty, dusty. The attendant who had been on duty was not at his desk. But when Francois walked back, his bag was where he had left it. It was because he was rushed. It had all been hectic, but finally, after so long, he had access to the museum. He was pleased with himself on the train. A certain episode in his life, his intellectual life, was complete. He is feeling complete when a man comes to his compartment. He is a nasty, wiry man, mid-aged, with a goatee, a pinched face, and he is selling a brochure about the history of the blue train. It's not expensive, but Francois declines politely. The nasty, wiry man says, "She is 100 years old, the blue train. During the war she carried people fleeing from the bombs." That was puzzling. "What war was that?" asked Francois. The man rehearsed tidbits from his brochure. The horsepower, the length of the carriages, the years of service, the impressive pistons, the several times kings and queens had travelled on her tracks. Then the nasty, wiry man said, "The blue train is the only train in the world that goes nowhere." "Nowhere?" laughed Francois. "We end up where we started," the nasty, wiry man said. Francois put his fingers in his pocket. "I've got a ticket to the city," he said, holding it up. The nasty, wiry man said, "Good for you." And with that, he left the compartment and moved on to the next. It was only a short while after this that there was running or fast steps outside Francois's compartment, and voices, but the commotion stopped. Then suddenly his door slid open and a little boy came in and jumped up on the seating near the doorway. "My name is Oliver," the boy said, introducing himself. "Hello, Oliver. My name is Francois." "I've never been on the blue train before," said Oliver. "No? I'm going to the city." "So am I." Francois still had the ticket in his fingers. Oliver was 9 or 10, with a bowl-cut hairdo, and Francois thought him overdressed. He was wearing a white shirt with pressed pants and well-polished shoes. He was in his very best for the trip to the city. "Who are you with? Your parents?" asked Francois. "My auntie," said the boy. "I see." They then sat there in silence for a minute, and both rode the shifting sway. Francois's quick transport to his questions was immediate, and he was resigned that he would now be sharing the compartment with the boy. Above the hypnosis of the wheels, he anticipated his conversation with Professor Whalen. They'll discuss the statue, its beginnings, its materials, its dimensions, its smile. But the boy looked at Francois as if astonished. "What are you doing?" he asked. "What do you mean, what am I doing?" asked Francois. He wasn't doing anything. But the boy changed the subject. "The blue train is 100 years old," he announced, pleased that he knew it. "So I hear, yes." Then the boy jumped down from the seat. "I better get back," he said. "Okay," said Francois. And the boy left and scuttled off, almost running. Yes, the water stains. The stain across her shoulder made the smile of the goddess even more multi-layered. It is the imperfection that adds to the perfection. There is a Japanese word for it, but just then Francois couldn't quite remember what it was. "What is that word?" he said to himself. "Where, if something is broken or damaged, rather than throwing it away or even repairing it, the imperfection is left, made a feature, celebrated." There's a Japanese word for it. Francois could see the word written in his mind text, and he had used it in conversation not long before, but it was dangling ill-formed on the tip of his tongue. That was happening to him lately, having words on the tip of his tongue, but there was no English equivalent in this instance, a word for how the water stain makes the almost carnal smile of the goddess 100 times more complex, how her smile says a dozen different things. He was annoyed. "Oh, what is that word?" He made up some Japanese-sounding attempts, but nothing brought it forth. In any case, the stain, the blemish, it conformed in any case to his own observation of mortal women no less than goddesses. No beauty is complete without a blemish. In his conversation with Professor Whalen, they will discuss the sculptor and his school and his influences. And then there is the delicate question of whether the statue is legal or not, that such a treasure should be in private hands and be almost unmentioned in the literature and hidden from researchers and from aesthetes. But this is perhaps true of everything in the museum, if not all museums, warehouses for colonial plunder. Had he bought a brochure from the nasty, wiry man, Francois would have known that the blue train's original engine had been retired to a railway museum long ago, and the current engine had almost twice the motive force. Her engine drags the full weight with the sound of plump iron. The blue train moves through the night. Considerably later, the compartment door slides open again and a woman hurries in. An older woman, perhaps in her 70s. She is wearing a maroon cardigan. She wears a brooch. She is well dressed. She is sprightly footed and fiercely pale-eyed. She is grey-haired. She is old-skinned. She has a schoolma'am hand. She sits and looks at Francois, bending her neck. "Has the porter been around yet?" she asks, flat. "No, I haven't seen him," said Francois. "He'll be along soon," she said. "He'll put you off the train." Francois looked at her. "I'm sorry?" "The porter is going to put you off the train at the next station." Francois laughed. "I'm sorry, and who are you?" he was forced to say. "You're the one who's thinking about the statue, aren't you?" said the woman. "I think there's been a mistake," said Francois. The porter will put you off the train. You're the one who's thinking about the statue. I don't know what you're talking about. And why on earth would the porter put me off the train? You're thinking about the statue. He's going to put you off the train. Francois shook his head and laughed again. Why would he do that? I'm sorry, I don't understand this. Who are you? The woman, though, had told him what she wanted to say and didn't reply. Thinking he might restart the entire conversation on a better footing, Francois changed the subject. Are you going through to the city? He asked. Yes, she said. All stations. Me too, he said, fingering his ticket. Then she offered, I'm going home. Oh? I grew up in the city. I haven't been back for years. Lots of memories, Francois suggested. No, she said. All the places from my childhood are gone. They were destroyed in the bombing. The bombing. But it will be good to go home. I don't understand, said Francois, turning back. What were you saying about the porter? I've got a valid ticket. He held up the ticket in his fingers again. You're the one who's thinking about the statue, the woman said once more. The statue? What about the statue? The porter will put you out, she said, at the next station, at Eastbourne. Francois shook his head again. Wait, Eastbourne isn't the next station, he said, frowning now. Eastbourne isn't on this line. I grew up in Eastbourne. Eastbourne isn't on this line. When the porter gets here, he will put you out, the woman said again. I don't think he will, said Francois. I don't know why you're saying this. When he gets here, she then said, pretend you are asleep. I don't know how you know anything about the statue, and I thank you for your advice, said Francois. But what I think about is not your business or the business of the porter. I expect the porter will check my ticket and everything will be in order. No, she insisted. He'll put you out at Eastbourne. Pretend you are asleep. And with that, she stood up, slid open the door and left. Eastbourne was once a sparsely housed town with open paddocks, but it is not like that now. Francois's family moved there when he was only 3. His mother was French. It was his mother who had always encouraged his interest in artefact and timelines. But he had not been back to Eastbourne, not for a dozen or more years. There was nothing there. He had no explanation for the old woman, but he considered her erratic. Eastbourne was definitely not on this line, and he was not going to derail his thoughts on the statue of the goddess on the basis of an incoherent ramble. The smile, captured in stone, was inescapable. It was the foremost thing in his thoughts, and it probably would be for many days. So ancient, so beautiful. Getting access to the museum had been one of the labours of Hercules. The letter of recommendation from Professor Whalen was persuasive in the end. It was good of him to write the letter. Francois had the letter in his top pocket, but he was disquieted. He looked at his reflection in the passing black country. He felt the ticket in his fingers. The statue doesn't fit the timelines. A timeline attempts to sort events like stations sequentially. History travels in one direction, yet its wheels spin. The fast-turning trundle of steel, the blue train's percussion, soothes the mind. The chug. continuous and linear. Francois doodled in his thoughts, cataloguing. This continued for a long, linear while. But he grew increasingly uneasy. Then there was a kerfuffle outside his compartment, and through the glass he saw the boy, Oliver, again. Francois leapt to his feet and met the boy outside the compartment door. The boy was running past. "Oliver! Oliver!" Francois called quietly. "Have you seen the porter? Do you know where the porter is?" The porter, Francois kept thinking, must be along soon. But the boy scuttles into another compartment, yelling with excitement, "The tunnel is coming!" Just at that moment, the blue train hit the tunnel. The lighting flickered, failed for a moment, then came back on. The blue train moved through the black tube. Francois, who was standing up, holds on. The tunnel is extended. There is a long pause. After the train emerged from the tunnel, unenclosed again, Francois turned, looking back into his compartment, and saw that his bag was gone. "Where is my bag?" Panicked, he veered around, looked up and down the carriage. But as he panicked, and scenarios all suggested themselves, all of them impossible, he saw the bag in the netted holds above the seat, which is where he had put it. Relieved, annoyed with himself, he sat back down in his window seat and thought, the porter must be along soon. Once through the tunnel, the outside shadows passed by with the same speed, but here and there were lights of houses, farms, street lights, just a few. Then, along the railway line, there was a factory, brightly lit with floodlights, but it was empty. No one. Empty buildings, pipes and chimneys, the old evidence of industry, the cold, flood-lit emptiness of which took Francois back to the museum, the exhibits. There were many treasures. He would need not one day but many to make any proper assessment of them. There were broken shards, ceramic drinking vessels, ancient rusted tools, the leather sandal of some ancient man who fell into a bog, curious objects, exquisite jewellery. They were all in glass cases, carefully numbered, tentatively dated, placed in a timeline. The statue was not even a central display. It was to one side, in an alcove, as if it was hiding and shy, and the goddess seemed to be smiling about it. As he realigned his musings with the straight lines of the tracks and gazed unfocused out the window with its mix of passing shapes, lights here and there, and the mirror image of the compartment and his own face, he rubbed his ticket between his forefinger and his thumb. Then there were footsteps. There was the jingle of the porter's keys. Then Francois saw the porter, in his blue uniform, move along until he was standing directly outside Francois's compartment door. The porter called out so he could be heard all along the carriage. "Eastbourne, next station Eastbourne." He turned and opened Francois's compartment door. Francois lowered his chin and pretended to be asleep.